Don asked me if I wanted to stay seated, but I was so inspired by what I heard this morning that I wanted to transform my inspiration into a better projection on my feet. So if I could have my slides up, please. We heard a lot of talk this morning about collaboration and clusters, and it couldn't have been better because that's really what I want to talk about, the enormous opportunity we have here in Durham Region to use Durham as the center of a very dynamic and export-focused nuclear cluster. And also the talks about China and the U.S. markets are also two of the key targets for our technology. So what I want to do is quickly just say a couple words about, Bob assured me that my slides would be up there when I started. I counted on that, but while he's doing that, OCI is an industry association that represents about 175 private sectors throughout Canada with focus in Ontario in the nuclear sector. We supply the components, the services, and the equipment that make our plants successful. We also have a mandate to promote the nuclear industry and to advocate for continued use of nuclear in the province of Ontario. And of course, we are strongly behind the plan to refurbish the nuclear units at Darlington and to build new ones. So I've covered most of my overview. So what I want to do today is just mention that the industry now has an opportunity to go beyond the 25,000 jobs that we currently have in the province of Ontario and take that up to 50. The refurbishment project and the new build project at Darlington, both centered here in Durham Region, will add another 50,000 jobs in our sector. This is a cover sheet of our suppliers directory, and it's kind of appropriate. That's right on the cover is the Darlington nuclear plant. So that really is the focus of where this industry is going to grow over the next number of years. But looking beyond just Darlington, and you heard this morning both Kathy and the other speaker talked about the cluster, economic regional clusters, and I want to talk about that for a moment. The nuclear cluster in the province is quite broad. You'll see that shows some of the key companies in our sector. It extends all the way to Niagara and Cambridge to the west and to Ottawa on the east. But I think you'll also agree that the center of that cluster is right here in Durham Region, and that's my focus today. This is a little map that shows the names of some of the companies that are here in Durham Region. We've got about 15 supply companies in Pickering, Ajax, and Oshawa. And I think if you expand the envelope of Durham Region and include places like Peterborough and Frontenac and Northumberland, we'll add a few more. So let's think of Durham as more than just the boundaries that we currently live within. First of all, why am I so excited about nuclear that I want to stand up and share it with you? Well, as Roger Anderson said, I want to inspire action today. And the things that inspire me are what's going to happen in this nuclear sector in the province. Not all of our political leaders agree, but we have one of them, Minister Hudak, who is coming to our AGM in a couple of weeks, and he strongly believes that nuclear will continue to be the backbone of reliable, clean, and cost-effective electricity in the province of Ontario, power that's going to supply the processing plants that Christina is going to talk about to process the output of the Ring of Fire. So we have 18 units now in the province of Ontario. The 6 units at Darlington are going to require life extension to allow them to operate for another 25 to 30 years. We know that Darlington is well on the way to a $10 billion investment to extend the life of those very, very successful units that were just awarded just the other day an award as one of the top performing nuclear plants in the world. And you should all be proud. There's nobody from OPG here, so I will accept your applause on behalf of OPG for a great nuclear facility. That nuclear plant will be refurbished, and then we hope that the province will see its way to building 2 more nuclear units at that facility. So there's a great potential right here in the province of Ontario for the nuclear sector centered here in Durham Region. But we want to go beyond just Ontario and talk about how we can maximize those resources. Now, a couple of our speakers used the term cluster. And that term was initially coined by anybody who studied business will have heard of Michael Porter. He's a well-known Harvard professor, has written many articles and books on business. And he defines cluster as an economic region or a number of companies in a region in a similar business that collaborate through partnerships to achieve great success in both their own market and in export markets. There are some examples of cluster that you've all heard of. Seattle is a famous cluster for the defense and the aerospace sector. Boston is a cluster in the medical appliances and instruments sector. But I've got two that are a little closer to home, and one, of course, will appeal to George because it's the Toronto Financial Services Alliance, which is a wonderful example of what we've done in Toronto in one sector. And I've got another example of one that's close to my heart as well because it relates to the nuclear sector. But let's start with our local one. The Toronto Financial Services Alliance, headed by Janet Ecker, former cabinet minister, has a mandate, and I just read those terms and get inspired. A partnership and action mobilizing Toronto's financial services sector for global advantage, the kind of global thinking that we were talking about earlier today. They've been very successful in catalyzing the resources of our banking system, which is one of the first in the world, right, Justine? We have a great educational sector. We have some large investment companies here in the province. And their goal was to make Toronto a world-class financial sector. They've taken Toronto from 12th to 10th place in the global financial sector. That is inspiring, and I want you folks in Durham to think the same way. The Carolinas nuclear cluster was started when one of the government in Carolina recognized that they were lagging the U.S. In some of their development areas. They invited Michael Porter to come to Charlotte to give a presentation on his cluster strategy. They embraced what they learned from Dr. Porter, and they formed 12 clusters. And one of the leading clusters that came out of the Carolinas initiative is known as the Carolinas Nuclear Cluster. Well, what do they have achieved? 2 nuclear plants, 2 projects with 2 nuclear plants each are now under construction in the Carolinas region. The first nuclear units in the U.S. in 20 years under construction there. Large companies are moving into the region. Westinghouse, URS, B&W, head offices moving into the Charlotte area because they want to be in that nuclear cluster region. More importantly, Google and Facebook, 2 dynamic, growing companies that have large requirements for power through server farms, are building server farms in the Carolinas, not in California. California has a green energy policy, does not build nuclear plants. They want to go where they're assured of a long-term, reliable supply of electricity. That's why they moved to the Carolinas. And then recently a joint venture was formed to promote small modular reactors, also in the Carolinas. So let's look at that model and say, well, why can't we do the same thing here? We have all the ingredients that they have in the Carolinas. We have 2 world-class nuclear operators, one right here in Durham region at Bruce OPG and the other one at Bruce. We have a designer now in the private sector hands of a world-class CANDU technology, now owned by SNC-Lavalin. We have a strong supply chain, which I am so proud to represent, of companies across the province that can compete on a world stage in terms of the quality of the equipment and the services they can provide to the nuclear sector. We have a science and technology sector inspired by Minister Goodyear located at Chalk River, where some of the finest R&D is done to underpin the nuclear sector. We have a wonderful university sector with leadership right here in Durham through UOIT, which also has a key role to play in the cluster. And finally, we have a world-class regulator to ensure that our industry is among the finest and the safest in the world. So it's all here, and it can be centered in Durham. Our government has done something similar with the clean energy sector. They've said, let's see if we can take the clean energy sector to the next level. They've created a clean energy sector economic development strategy. They formed a task force, and they've led 15 clean tech trade missions. My argument is, let's do the same thing in the nuclear sector, and we're starting to see some traction. That traction can be mobilized if we successfully work together, and I've had some chats already with Kathy Weiss. We can do this together. We can start to take Durham Region to that next level. What I want to do is publicize the success of our industry so that people in Queen's Park and Ottawa know that we can be the engine for economic development. So just the other day, Minister Dogood visited one of our member companies, unfortunately not a Durham company, and he saw firsthand the kind of capability at a company called General Don Lee, which has been a supplier to the nuclear sector for many years. We continually meet with Ontario Cabinet ministers to promote our sector, and we've had some positive outcomes. The Ontario government, in cooperation with ourselves and the federal government, are leading a trade mission to the United Kingdom in March to promote the nuclear sector, and about 10 of our companies have signed up for that trade mission. We are also pleased to see the progress on nuclear cooperation with India that was now been implemented by the agreement signed by Minister Harper last week. So we are looking to India, a huge growing market, as you saw this morning, 1.1 billion people, a large growing market. Mr. Yu from China inspired us about the opportunities in China, which, by the way, does already operate 2 CANDU reactors and is looking at a couple more. So there are opportunities in China and the U.S. I think there's an opportunity for us to do work with one of the companies that's involved here in Ontario, Westinghouse. So we're looking at those external markets. A lot of effort can be devoted to helping some of them move into our region, to make Durham Region really the center of our economic cluster. So in conclusion, I'm inspired by the Carolinas. We've got all the assets here in Durham Region to make it an economic cluster. And as our friends at Nike said, just do it in Durham. We'll just add the Durham part. Thank you very much.